Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Digital Info Day session. My name is Em, and I am one of the myeloma information specialists at Myeloma UK, so I work on the info line and the Ask the Nurse email service. Before we begin our event this evening, I would like to go over some housekeeping. I'd like to let everyone know that this session is being recorded and will be available to watch on our Facebook page and our website soon after. We will be popping website links, publications, and useful information into the chat box throughout the event. If you have any questions that you would like to ask our expert, please use the Q&A box at the bottom or top of your screen, and we will try to answer as many as we can. Some of you may not be that familiar with our organisation, so I'd like to tell you briefly who we are and what we do. Myeloma UK exists to support all those affected by myeloma and related conditions, which include smouldering myeloma, MGUS, and AL amyloidosis. We are patient-focused and aim to empower, inform, and support patients in everything we do. As an organisation, we rely on the generosity and kindness of supporters who fundraise and donate. Myeloma UK is a charity solely funded by our supporters. We receive no funding at all from the NHS or government. Everything we do is funded by the voluntary contributions, fundraising, and gifts left in wills. We are truly thankful for all of your contributions as they allow us to continue working to help patients, their families, and their friends, and put on events just like this one. Tonight's digital event is on the topic of fatigue. Fatigue is a common problem for those with myeloma and related conditions, and tonight we will cover how you can manage this and answer your questions. So, let's get started. I'd like to welcome this evening's expert, Nuno Correa. He has been a registered nurse for over 10 years in haematology and oncology. In the last 5 years, he has been working as a myeloma clinical nurse specialist. Nuno is the co-organizer of a myeloma support group for HCA at the University College London. He has also been involved in data collection and research in myeloma, and recently was a co-author in an article published in the British Journal of Haematology. It's so nice to have you presenting for us, and I'll now hand over to Nuno to begin.
Thank you so much, Em. Hopefully everyone can hear me. It's absolute honor once again to be invited by the Myeloma UK and to be here, although it's not in person, but to be here and contribute and help a lot of you that obviously attended today, because this is such a hot topic. Probably is the number one thing that I'm being asked all the time about fatigue, about why this happens and causes for it, and how can we manage, because it's something that you will encounter throughout your journey, and this will affect you at some point, and there are ways to minimize and manage it as best as possible. As Emma has just mentioned, it's quite common, and this could be probably at the beginning itself caused by the myeloma. As many of you obviously here already developed myeloma, this can affect your bone marrow, and consequence of that is can affect your counts. When I say counts is, for instance, your hemoglobin. Hemoglobin or red cells is something that we all live with, and obviously more normal it is, having it in the normal range means that you will feel as normal as possible. If this will get affected, you will start experience being more fatigued, and this is obviously quite common because you wouldn't have enough cells to, let's say, transport the oxygen. Most of the cases, once you've been diagnosed and you know that you have myeloma, and your team starts treatment and your myeloma gets under control, fatigue being attributed to your myeloma gets less often. Obviously, being an incurable disease, the most important thing here is in regards to your quality of life. So that's where we're aiming. We are trying to aim for you to forget that you have myeloma as much as possible. So we'll focus on the main topic of finding ways for you to feel as normal as possible. Let's put it this way. And why keep it to yourself? That's another big question. And although I know I have experienced this in the beginning, it's quite difficult to out of the blue meet someone and start telling him all the problems you have in terms of side effects or even your problems you have in your life. Because a lot of the times I talk not only about your disease but about what is happening with your life. How are things at home, etc. And that is extremely important to talk with your team and share any thing that you've been experienced, mainly fatigue, how severe it is, or how you've been managing or strategies you have adopted. Quite often is almost impossible to describe from a lot of the patients how this really impacts. And if we think about it, fatigue is actually something that I'm not even able to measure. So I don't often ask anyone in a scale of 1 to 10 because that's pain. And pain eventually can be measured that way. But fatigue, if someone asks you, how is your fatigue? Either you're extremely fatigued, either you're mildly fatigued, or you don't feel it at all. But this can be experienced quite differently from someone, let's say, that is quite positive and always and doesn't pay too much attention to it, but actually you can feel that that person gets tired very quickly, and someone that have walks every day, almost does a marathon, but still feels that that has an impact in life. So fatigue, one of the main points is that it's quite different to each person and the way the person interprets what is fatigue for her. Um, in another point as well, for a lot of people, this can be quite difficult and because it's consistent, is persistent, and a lot of the times we want an easy solution. I hope that not all of you guys are here to try to find an easy solution, because as well for me there is no easy answer. We've been talking about it in the community, in the expertise field, and it's quite difficult to try to kind of give a general rule about what to do with fatigue, but there are many strategies which we'll cover in this session that hopefully will help you to minimize or at the same time understand what is fatigue, because I think better you understand and what is causing it, and in a way accept it, more normal it is for you to deal with it, and find strategies and ways along your day to put it back and not be the center of attention in your daily basis. So in a way, fatigue can affect you. A lot of the times I do joke with a battery, because it is true. You do start with a certain level. Doesn't necessarily mean a lot of the times that that level is at the top. So it's quite important to understand what level are you in the start of your day. But previously in the past, before you've been diagnosed, it would be something you wouldn't pay too much attention. But let's put it like electric cars, you start getting anxiety as you go along the day. You start getting anxious to try to understand if you can keep up throughout the day. And obviously, our community has patients as probably the early age as the 30s, towards the 90 and 100s. So it's quite different to each person to interpret it about their energy level, about their so-called battery. So what I think a lot of the times people do is don't pay too much attention to it. So it's quite frustrating if you get half through the day, let's say 4 or 5 o'clock, and you already run out of energy. And it's quite important to understand how you could actually manage it and find a way to try to spread it throughout the day. It could obviously have an impact as well if you're feeling tired, you're eating less, you feel less appetite. And although this is a bit controversial, because a lot of the times when I'm talking about mood swings, people do feel them with a certain medication that is quite broadly given to our community, which is steroids, and they do have as well an impact as well in the mood swings. So sometimes fatigue on its own is not only caused by, let's put it this way, purely through your myeloma, but a lot of the times we kind of, in a good way, in a bad way, let's put it this way, we do use the steroids, or you have been advised to take steroids for your treatment to minimize side effects. Obviously, there is a price to pay, and sometimes, although you might feel a lot of energy in the beginning, you do feel that energy runs out quite quickly. So some people do love it, some people do hate it, some people do have extreme mood swings. I receive a lot of calls from partners, I have to say, and sometimes you do feel you don't even notice yourself, but that can be putting you throughout the day feeling quite depressed, or you quite energized. Let's put it this way. And again, we're going to talk about it a lot in the session, but being open with your team does help a lot, especially to yourself, because then we understand better how we can advise you, obviously through what we know, through science, because that's one of the most important topics, but as well through experience. You're not alone. This is a big community, and things have worked for other people, and that's obviously why we advise things a certain way a lot of the times. Another thing that you might notice, obviously, is things more physical, like short of breath, difficult to walk that extra mile that you used to do, feeling like you don't want to get out of bed, don't want to get out of the sofa, feeling that you start losing some of your memory, or start losing things that you've been so sharp in the past and being able to remember, and now you feel yourself a lot of the times that you feel frustrated and you're able to do it, and other things as well, because as I said, it's such an important topic in the intimacy of the person. Okay, and this, a lot of the things is not talked very openly, and the reason why I emphasize talking about it is because it will have an impact, like it or not, in your intimacy, and as well it will have an impact for us, because if we don't know that are sometimes things very easy to advise you, either medication or either some strategies, that obviously will have an impact not only you, but as well in your relationships. That's why it's mentioned here. One topic that not only, but that comes very often associated with fatigue, but very difficult to dissociate with treatment, is what we call chemo brain, chemo fog. A lot of people give different names. I do normally address this as the forgetfulness, purely because it's something that unless you experience, you wouldn't have known about it. And this could be quite frightening for people. The thing that I've learned throughout the experience, and I do hope that that helps some people, is that talking and addressing this in advance, although this is my strategy, it might not be the same for other people, is quite good to know what is expecting you ahead. And that has worked for me, and the patients that I looked after quite a lot. And it's quite difficult to explain that, although you might feel quite well at this day, you might not feel as sharp in terms of your memory, in terms of making decisions, in terms of being actually able to do them in the future. So it's always good to remind that these things would happen just purely because when they happen, then you kind of have the feeling that you're not alone, and this happens to other people. Chemo brain is quite usually talked in our community as something that comes towards the treatment. So along the way throughout the treatment, you see that you becoming very forgetful, or for some people, which now will know exactly what I'm talking about, is if they have a autologous stem cell transplant, and that almost 100% happen towards the next few months. So if you had a transplant, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're going towards the phase of having a transplant, or even if that's the case, in a hospital bed and preparing to have a transplant, this is something that tends to affect you for months. and it's known, and you don't need to be afraid. You just need strategies, because this will be minimized throughout the months after the transplant. Other things that obviously could be quite difficult to understand, but ourselves, because as well, I'm an expert, and I know towards the years what I've been seeing, and I do understand the way our body works. It's understandable that our body, for instance, toward the infection, be concentrated in doing other stuff, like saving your life, let's put it this way. And it's quite understandable that you feel extremely exhausted if you're going through an infection. And bearing in mind that infections are out there, and it's very difficult to fight them in a way, an efficient way, as you used to do in the past once you start your treatment, if that makes sense. So you start your treatment, you're more prone to infections, it's more difficult to get rid of them. Obviously, your body needs to obviously spend much more energy to do so, okay? And if you quite remember in the past, if you had a stressful job, or you're going through a stressful phase throughout your job, or even at home, this all can have an impact in terms of your ability to or being open and able to deal with things. If you're not in that mindset, obviously you're going to feel more tired. So that's quite important to kind of have a balance in terms of mind and body, if I can put it this way. As we have covered just briefly about what can cause fatigue. So I'm going to start with myeloma itself, because of what I just mentioned before. It could be one of the causes could be the anemia. Other causes could be if you have experienced pain when you've been diagnosed, or if you relapse and you have been experienced pain due to problems with your bones. Obviously, you're not going to be able to mobilize as much. So this is a quite of a important part in the fatigue, or that's why one of the causes why it leads to the fatigue. Another thing, as we know, it could have an impact in your kidneys. If the kidneys don't function, again, it's all correlated. Our body is very smart, but if something is becoming weak, it always translates in the rest. Okay, we're part of the whole. Okay, myeloma treatment itself, I already covered probably the number one treatment that I think it causes you the most amount of fatigue, which is stem cell transplant. But being a disease which requires treatment throughout your life, and quite often every single month, your treatment is always going to have a secondary effect. And I know, as I normally call it, even if you're on something called maintenance, which is just having a chemo tablet, and you have that, every month. I normally say to my patients is like having a constant backpack with some stones in it. Okay, it's always something that is present there. And sometimes, if I put it in a visual way, people do think that it makes a lot of sense, rather than trying to explain them. Oh, it's just because of physiologically of things. It is because your body is having slightly stressed because of the chemo drugs we give you. That doesn't make much sense, but explaining you that it's all related with treatment, and you have like a backpack, that's make a lot of sense. Lifestyle itself, if I cannot emphasize even more that well-balanced diet, well-balanced exercise program does wonders. You might not think it does, but a lot of the times I wouldn't say it's a wake-up call, and we're not here to talk about it. No one knows why we have myeloma. It just does happen, and sometimes that's the way we should look at it. But it's sometimes to try, and that's why I'm here for, to try to get you to live your life as normal as possible. Sometimes you just need to change some of your normal daily activities. So if you're not a person who used to walk or do a couple of kilometers a day, that's something I would emphasize definitely, because that will promote, let's put it, your heart to function better, and that ultimately will help to reduce your fatigue levels. In another way, if you have a balanced, healthy lifestyle, rather than just grab a sandwich here and there and get a bag of crisps. That is still calories, but it's not as with a high quality of vitamins and minerals that you need. So that will as well be a fundamental part in reducing the levels of fatigue. And each person obviously goes through different stages. I think the most difficult one is definitely when you're diagnosed, and that has a big impact. But throughout your journey, as you accept you have myeloma, as you accept to deal how to deal with it, and having this balance with mind in your body, that does help a lot to reduce the fatigue levels and try to get you ultimately to have a most normal life as normal as possible. As I did already mention briefly, but it's never enough to emphasize, and that's why here for in these presentations, if we don't emphasize things, we will often forget. And I do hope at least you retain 1% of all the information, because that's I'm quite happy with it, because a lot of the time it's quite heavy, the information we talk about all of things, but I'm trying to be as easier and simple as possible. But as I mentioned before, anemia, which is a low red blood cell, infections, pain, kidney problems, and treatment related, all have an impact in fatigue for different reasons. As I explained, pain, you don't feel that you can be as active. Infection, if you have more recurrent infections, you do tend to take more time to recover, and that will have an impact in your energy levels. Kidney problems, as I mentioned, if you have fluid retention, that is going to make you more fatigued. It needs to be about, we need to find a balance here. And ultimately, with treatments or medication that we will potentially give you, trying to find the tune balance, as I normally say. You don't need to be on a certain dose. You need to open with your team. And a lot of the time, the way I approach any treatment is this is a team effort. It doesn't work if it's only our side trying to give strategies. We always need to discuss it as a team. That's why I find quite important. Painkillers here comes because throughout phases that you might experience pain, you might require some painkillers that actually might make you feel a bit more drowsy or more fatigued, and we're here for to try to balance that. In terms of the lifestyle topic, which is quite important, a diet that you don't look after yourself, you don't pay too much attention to a diet or nutrition, actually can have a big impact. The number one question that I've asked is that should I pay any attention? Should I have any specific supplements? Should I stop having any sugar? And that's quite understandable. A lot of people just live with myeloma and don't want to change any of their normal habits. A lot of people want to go completely extreme. I always say that there needs to be a fine balance. You don't need to cut on anything. You just need to be reasonable. And reasonable is quite different for each person, I have to say. But as a healthcare profession, knowing what food does to your body, it's quite important to have a balanced diet, and trying to prepare your meals as much as possible, because a lot of the times, as I mentioned, with steroids, you don't know when you're going to be able to cook or you're going to be available to cook. Let's put it this way: if you don't feel in the mood, if you don't feel the energy, you won't be able to cook. And that's probably you lost the chance to actually plan ahead, plan in advance, and have actually prepared, I would say, almost like your week in advance, to try to balance those days which you feel quite low mood, feel quite low, you have less energy, your battery is almost empty, as we mentioned in the beginning. And that is quite important as well. Not only having a good diet and nutrition, but planning, I do find it's quite important. Difficulty sleeping could be for various reasons. Again, this is a difficult one just purely because it could be different for each person. One person that is having steroids, I do know why. It is cause related or is related with the drugs. because dexamethasone does make you sleep less and disturbs your sleep. So when the days you're having that dexamethasone, you more than likely will just clean your eyes twice rather than trying to go to bed and have a good and peaceful rest. And besides that, psychologically, which is important to address, it's if you're not going through a phase which you've been having a lot of issues to work or with your family, or even accepting this disease, is will be having an impact, obviously, in the quality of your sleep. Besides that, depending on what you used to do, I do deal with people that used to do a marathon, and when they diagnosed, we have said that it is completely out of the equation or out of the plans for a while. People don't accept it very well. So obviously the energy or the activity will be quite different from what it used to be. And emotionally, as I mentioned a bit, with the difficulty sleeping, if you're going through a rough phase, is going to have an impact itself in the way, in the energy, in the ability for you to cope with the activities. What is very important and emphasize is that this is a team effort, as mentioned before, and it's quite important to communicate with your team and be open about it. We do have strategies to try to get some information with you, but a lot of the times, as much as we use those strategies, I always find that it's something that we miss, and that's quite often what I notice with almost everyone that I met throughout their journey. So it's quite important to be open and transparent and do really address the big problems or the big concerns you have in your life, because normally what I do tend to ask is, what is your biggest concern? Because the other ones, I think they're very easy to manage. Your biggest concern is what is more important for you, and that's what I really want to resolve, will help you to find strategies to minimize it. And it's quite easily missed, fatigue, for all the reasons that I mentioned. There is no tool. We're not able to measure it, and it's just a broad way to say, I'm just feeling more tired than usual. Obviously, your team has experienced a lot of the same questions, and a lot of the strategies that we implement is trying to understand how we can help you, to guide you to fitting your activities throughout the day, to live your day-to-day life as best as possible. And what I find that is quite useful is just to understand as well, having an agenda for your day. Either you're at work, either you're already retired, but having an agenda for what you want to do with your day, and discuss it with your team to see how feasible that is and what strategies can you implement to make it through the day. A lot of the times I feel like there is nothing more rewarding for yourself than having a nap after lunch. And although it seems like a bit of an old age thing, it's quite useful, and a lot of patients that I work with, they use it quite often, and that helps a lot. So it's just another example how useful could be discussing with your team and getting strategies. Nothing more useful than having a diary in hand. So I do have mine as well, and it's extremely useful to have something physical and getting someone to actually showing you what they have done, what they have hoped to do and they couldn't achieve. And a lot of the times I think if you put it in wording, it's much more easier to help you through that. Just purely because, as I mentioned, you normally, or I would say, I wouldn't say normally, because it could be quite different from well, different teams work different ways, let's put it this way. And what I would normally find is that unless you write it down, you might forget about it. there will be important information you're going to lose. One other strategy is, for instance, throughout your appointments or when you're coming to see your healthcare professionals, bring someone with you, because a lot of the times is your family member that he will help you to remember some of the things or just point some of the things that you might actually, in a way, not think that would be that important. Let's put it this way, for instance, you've been sleeping more, but you haven't throughout the day, but you haven't mentioned it at all, but your relative actually points that is something that they've noticed that has increased. And those subtle changes a lot of the times are very important to us because it might give us some guidance or some clues about some things that might start changing for you. So that's why I find is always very important. And I do have this commitment with a lot of patients that I see is writing it down, or even more important, using obviously this very helpful diary from the Myeloma UK to track a lot of the things. And besides, negotiate, because I think a lot of the times it's all about trying to negotiate where to go to holidays, because that's such an important thing to look forward. What activities you can do, what is the amount of activities, amount of time, and help you to actually have a realistic schedule throughout your day so you can achieve those activities as much as possible. There are some ways to treat certain causes of fatigue. Probably the most, I wouldn't say easier one, but the things that we can actually give something and that would potentially work is throughout, for instance, with anemia. Anemia, as I mentioned, could affect you. It has affected a lot of new diagnosed patients, and that would mean that your hemoglobin level will be low. You might require a more extreme treatment. I wouldn't say that it's a negative way, but it could be a blood transfusion. It means that you're on a level which is quite low, and we don't want to leave it for too late, and we need a quick fix, and you might require a blood transfusion to increase your levels before we start addressing what is the cause of the problem, and if it is myeloma treatment, obviously, but as well something called EPO, which stands for erythropoietin, and that could be given, or is oftenly given, after we have identified a constant reduction in your hemoglobin. Many causes could be addressed to this. One, obviously, your myeloma. Others could be continuous treatments. Thankful treatments have evolved, and they have prolonged the life expectancy dramatically throughout the years. So it is expected at some point for some patients and potentially patients that are on doing this journey for a longer time that they just need a bit of a boost. And erythropoietin is an absolutely safe injection you have in a different variety, either weekly, either once a month, and that will help. That will just help your body to produce more red cells, and that could be a way potentially to increase your hemoglobin, and that will lead to a reduction in fatigue. It doesn't mean that it is for everyone. You need to feel some certain parameters. So that's why it's always useful, what I just mentioned several times, be open, transparent, and discuss it with your team of healthcare professionals. Painkillers. If you have been through a phase where you're having experienced more pain, you might require actually a painkiller. I do know that I have mentioned that this could be a cause, but this could actually be a solution for many cases, and there are a lot of different painkillers. To name the most simple one could be paracetamol. If you do feel the pain is well controlled, you're going to be able to go for your normal walk. You're going to be able to do your normal activities, to pick up your kids, your grandkids, play with them, go for a 30-minute walk, an hour walk. That will be able then to fight your fatigue because you are doing more for yourself. Mind-body therapies, just mention a few: yoga, Pilates, that is obviously helpful to stretch and to be more mobile. So that will, in a way, as I mentioned, reduce the levels. In terms of kidney problems, obviously, very individual, this topic. It depends really. For some people, they need to drink more. For other people, they need to have a more restricted fluid intake. And then ultimately, infections. As quick as you can get rid of it, easier it is to recover from that period of time where your body needs to fight the infection and then you're recovering from it, if that makes sense. One of the most common things is for this to be not to be overlooked, so it's quite easily missed. You do have the common cold you used to have it in the past and you dismiss it. You don't tell to your healthcare professionals. And I do have seen patients that actually I could have resolved that infection quite quickly and easily. And then this prolongs to time, meaning that it takes much longer to fight it. And this could be to antivirals, antibiotics, antifungals. This is just a family of different kind of medications to help you to fight infections. And obviously, your treatment, and very important, although it's the last one, your treatment should be tailored, should be given exactly to your needs. If it has a big impact in your life, this should be adjusted. And don't be afraid of telling your healthcare, your team of professionals that if there is a way to adjust it because of the impact fatigue is being having in your life. So probably to wrap it up in 4 topics: eat well, rest, exercise, and time your treatments accordingly. Why is this here? Again, I think if things got repeated, it's because they're important. It might be a clue to actually open a possible way to reduce the fatigue, okay? We're not here to cure the fatigue and take it completely away, but to reduce it, which is much more easier to do rather than the expectations of cut or of not having fatigue at all. Eating well, as I mentioned, good variety of food, eating meals throughout the day. I mean, I could be here for hours and hours, as we all can understand. Obviously, we're not doing that. Rest. Be mindful about having time to rest. A lot of the times, and people might have a kind of a sleep cleaning. What I'm trying to say is that when you go to bed, a lot of the people feel frustrated because they don't go to sleep. When they don't realize is and this is quite of a topic at the moment, is you have ways to minimize this. If you don't go on a cell phone, if you instead of watching the TV, read a book, that are all things that are not stimulation your brain, and that will ultimately, help you to go to sleep more easily. Exercise, a difficult one. I do know you want to exercise more, you want to walk more, but there are 2 different types of fatigue. There is a fatigue caused by you're not mobilizing and your treatment, and there is a fatigue caused by you exercising, and that is quite of a healthy fatigue. So you being tired will help you actually to have a better night of sleep. And time the treatments accordingly to their effect. This one, again, it depends on the treatment, but basically what I'm trying to say here is, for instance, a lot of people, and this is one of my common questions, they like to spend their weekend with their family and take the most of it. So we time their treatments for the beginning of the week, knowing that they will be affected by steroids. Other people prefer to have it on Friday because they do know that they will benefit from the steroids. So actually ask your healthcare professional, how can I take the most of my weekend or take the most of my week? Because a lot of people are still working and they want to take the most of it. For instance, you would have treatment on Friday, meaning that you're going to be more productive Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday. Let's put it this way. Just to give a few tips as well, I think I did already went through a couple of them, but that's I think quite good to emphasize these topics. They're so important. Health and balanced diet. Eat little more often. cook and freeze the food. I wouldn't recommend buying food, if you know what I mean. It's just purely because you have much more nutrients, and the quality of the food will be much better if you're knowing what you're putting in your plate. That's, I hope, don't discourage people not to buy prep meals, but I do think that's much better. So please don't be kind with me in regards to this topic. I do understand that, and not everyone loves to cook, but just saying, maybe it's a passion you don't know yet. And don't be afraid of meeting someone else. Your team is quite wide. That's why I always address this as healthcare professionals and not your doctor or your nurse. We are a team of healthcare professionals. I always say to you that my team starts with the person who cleans the floor, because if the floor is not well clean, the infection rate will go up. So a dietitian is such a useful tool, and you can have access to it. Just ask your team to help you to meet and have that appointment. And there is here a warning in regards to supplements. And the reason why we haven't mentioned any supplements is because there is no supplement we can recommend, or I would say there is only one supplement I would recommend, which is having vitamin D, because as we know, the UK population has a low prevalence of vitamin D. So quite often it's the number one supplement. Just ask what is just the dose you should have from your healthcare professional. But we often say, if you have a normal treatment, just take a pill recommended and normally says in the box. That's the only one supplement. As everyone can understand, although everyone here has myeloma, it's extremely rare disease. There is a very, very limited information about having treatments. So imagine having treatments plus, having a certain supplement. It is impossible. And we're not saying that it couldn't help, but what a lot of the times you could do is just jeopardizing your health, taking certain supplements that actually ultimately is not going to do anything for you. In terms of resting, as I mentioned before, and just to recap, it is about establishing a good sleeping routine, minimizing the noise, light in the bedroom, adjusting the temperature, feeling yourself comfortable, getting away from any laptops, any TVs, any phones, and don't oversleep as well. For a lot of people, a certain amount of hours is more than enough. Obviously, I think it's quite common sense, but never enough to emphasize. Tea, especially black tea that has caffeine in it, coffee, alcohol, all of it. Besides, obviously, in the last topic, the alcohol could have an impact in your treatment, so be careful with that. It will as well act as a stimulant, so it won't help you to actually go to sleep, and it will make it more difficult for you. And my number one advice, naps, they do wonders, and I do emphasize that it's just a small act that will do quite of a big improvement in your quality of life. Exercise, you should never be discouraged, or most of the cases, if you have been discouraged, please do ask why. But doing the most common exercise ever, which is walking, a lot of people could get some information about it, but it's the easiest thing to do. It's so easier to fit in your agenda a couple of minutes of walking a day, half an hour, 1 hour. It does wonders for you. Obviously, people that are used to do high impact exercises, they need to be careful. But I always say what is the exercise that you love the most to your healthcare professional team, and they will advise you if you can adjust or not, or if you can substitute by a different one. Because some people do hate exercise and people do love it. So it's always trying to find the midway. Other alternative therapies is obviously, as I already mentioned a bit before, is doing gentle yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, relaxation. That all contributes to have a kind of a mindset or getting your body and soul in synchronization, let's put it this way, and it will help to fight a lot of the stress and frustration you might find or encounter because of having the fatigue. So all useful tips and all useful that doesn't fit, might not fit a lot of people, but trying to at least get some information about each topic will definitely help. It's all about planning your day so you have a easier, or you achieve the 3 Ps of the day, which is plan, prioritize, and pace. It seems quite simple a lot of the time. Due to the lack of it, people get quite frustration. So starting with planning how you feel, plan what things you want to do, and prioritize them will ultimately help you to achieve that, and won't allow you to overdo it or run quite over what actually are your expectations. So measure your expectations, plan, prioritize what is important for you, and I'm quite sure you will achieve it. Not for me, but you can hear that from the community, which is quite useful. I think a lot of the times being in the community is to actually hear from other people and how that helped them. In this case, for instance, quite useful is to divide work and not to try to achieve something that you might have done in the past, but you just need to adapt. Ultimately, I don't want anyone to get frustrated. So that's why it's such a useful tip. As I said, very important, have a balance about, exercises and what you can do to minimize the fatigue.
Thank you so much, Nuno. That was an excellent talk. It was great to hear how sort of you speak to your patients about fatigue and how they speak to you about it. That was really great. So we're now going to take some audience questions. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions in advance. We appreciate your honesty in talking about some of the difficult situations you might be experiencing, and we hope that we can offer some support and some information today. If you'd like to submit any more questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and we'll try our best to get through as many as possible. So the first question we have, Nuno, is from Tracy, who said, I am newly diagnosed, so the effects of chemo are starting to impact on me. I'm unsure whether it's the myeloma or the chemo that makes me feel fatigued. I go for a short walk on most days. Does this help with fatigue, and should I carry on?
Half of the question was already answered in a way. It could be because of both. That's the honest truth. And quite often it does happen at the beginning for you to have both of them due to the effects of the chemotherapy. But until they have completely suppressed most of the cells, you might still experience the fatigue. As I mentioned, for instance, if you have a low hemoglobin to your disease, this could be why you're having fatigue, and alongside, I think it's quite of an impact in the beginning for a lot of the patients, but because they actually might feel a bit worse at the beginning until they feel the benefit. And I cannot emphasize that keep up with the good work, keep up with the walks. Fighting the fatigue is the most important thing. It's a contradiction, I know, but give it a try. You will see that, like I was saying, a quality of you being tired, because it's 2 different things, is a good tiredness after walking, and that will give you a good night of sleep. And besides, I mean, this is a fight, so it's just the first round, so we don't want to give up. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, that's really great advice there. So our next question is from Carol, who's asked if it's common to still get fatigue whilst in remission.
It misses a few things that would help indefinitely to give a more tailored answer. The answer is yes, but is it a yes because she has stopped the treatment and still finding some side effects from it, or is a yes because she is in a remission, meaning that she's on drugs like the thalidomide-based drugs like lenalidomide, and meaning that because she's on that drug, she will still experience some fatigue throughout the time. because that's quite common. So if in a way I stumble in the kind of the right scenario, which is for Carol to be in a remission with a continuous a drug, I would say that it is the cause effect of, it's kind of, you get a trade, you're in remission, but to keep that remission, you need to keep going on that medication, and that is causing a bit of fatigue. Again, keep doing the same like Tracy did, is keep doing the walks, keep exercising every day. You will see a benefit.
Yeah, we certainly do on the info line speak to plenty of patients who are in remission who are still having symptoms, including fatigue. And yeah, so speaking to your medical team is certainly really important, making sure they're aware of how you're feeling and they can look into it and just see if there's anything else that they can do as well. So the next question is from Marnie. So we've talked a little bit about supplements, and Marnie's asked, are there any supplements that can help to reduce fatigue and give more energy?
I wouldn't think anything that I've said before. Vitamin D, just adjust the dose and just ask your medical team. Most of the times, and maybe a lot of the times, and apologies for that if the medical team already advised and already given. That's the only supplement we would recommend. I would just give a cautious here, or a warning, or not a warning, but I would just be a bit cautious in about taking supplements. Normally, uh, every healthcare professional or every team is different. The teams might have said, we were open. We wouldn't think that would do any harm. And although we're not promoting, we might say you can give it a try. What is the important to take is never to start without saying to your team what are you taking, for two reasons. One, because it might actually make more harm than good. Second, it could reduce the effect of your treatment, which is, again, quite bad. I mean, we're giving you a drug and then it's not getting us anywhere, and we don't understand why it's just because of that simple supplement, which is blocking some actions of the drug. And that has happened in the past with kind of a few patients in different hospitals. I have heard of it. And third, because we need to be aware, so we are more attentive in case your blood results change, we know it's because of that. So it's quite important.
Fab, that's a great answer. So next question is from Martin, who's asked whether patients should try to push through their fatigue and try to ignore it, or whether they should sort of go with it.
What I would advise Martin is that, I mean, I think he's a quite of a fighter. I think, I mean, asking and already giving an answer, just saying, push it and go through it. I think it's a good mindset. Martin, what I would advise for you is to take some of the strategies to reduce, because yes, you need to go through it, fight through it. Don't get discouraged about how the fatigue is affecting your life, but adjust here and there. And that's why it's so important sometimes to spend quite of a time to try to understand what is the expectations about what patients want to achieve, what treatments they are having, so we can advise better. What I would say as a general answer, take some of the strategies or some of the advice we have given today. You will find that it will be helpful, and you will be able to keep fighting through, but probably with a bit more energy, hopefully.
Yeah, that balance is really important between sort of pushing through and making sure that you're pacing yourself so you're not pushing yourself too hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the next question is about smoldering myeloma. So is it possible for patients with smoldering myeloma or who are asymptomatic to experience fatigue?
That's another question, and I'm not trying to avoid the answer, but it's just purely because what is the age we're talking about again, and what are the other medical conditions? Meaning, what does that person suffer from? Because smoldering myeloma might not be the most, or might not be the most worrying thing for that person. Let's put it this way. So it is difficult to say. The other thing is as well, when you know that you have something, especially the smaller myeloma, it's quite of a challenging one psychologically, because you know that you have it, And every small thing, why wouldn't you think that is related with your myeloma or the possible myeloma you might experience in the future? So it is a tricky one. I'm not trying to avoid the answer, but I'm trying to explain to the audience how difficult it is for us to try to find a cause effect. The general answer, I can say that I wouldn't think that could be related with it purely just because he wouldn't cause fatigue on his own. If it's causing fatigue, and I think the sweet spot to this answer is if it's causing fatigue, it's because there is already an impact. So if your medical team hasn't noticed there is any impact in your bloods or any scan that have you done, why would it actually be related with your smoldering cell?
Yeah, that's really good. So yeah, making sure that you're speaking to your medical team if you're experiencing symptoms with your smoldering myeloma. So
Sure.
we've had a live question actually. So this is one of our people watching has asked, can you say anything on how exhaustion spreads to family members? There's a patient who's now on fourth line treatment and it's brought about big life changes for the family.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because although I don't know all the details, but fourth line of treatment that says a lot. It's been a long journey. Mentally, I cannot emphasize how challenging that could be for the person, and no one fights normally, or goes through this journey and fights it normally on its own. It's a team effort. Healthcare professionals, but family as well. Um, I could potentially see the reason why, and could potentially be the long-term treatment, the lines of treatment, and mentally and physically, the trips to have treatment, and how and the family itself trying to support their loved ones, obviously can it's tiring, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said for stress impacting on
Sure.
fatigue. And of course that's
Sure.
going to affect the family members and loved ones very much as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's
So the next question is from Joanne asking, why am I tired all day and then can't sleep at night?
yeah a very good one. I think what I always say instead of just saying it's a good question is going and trying to deconstruct the bulk of it. As we talk about very, very good strategies, and believe us, we've been doing this for quite a few years now, and there always a reason why, and that's why it's so important to ask the right questions, or as the opposite, as I'm being promoting to everyone, be open and say exactly what they've been having and exactly why they think that might be the cause. Because Joanna might, not have a very good sleep pattern. She might actually be quite active throughout the day. She might have, a cup of coffee at 6, 7 p.m. before going to bed. That all will have an impact. Besides, have you tried to walk every day, at least half an hour, 1 hour, trying to exercise, getting that tiredness, healthy tiredness caused by you exercising. So a lot to be said, and not to disregard as well psychologically. It could have an impact, and I haven't brought it at this stage, but for instance, being open with your team and looking for psychological support. We know that sometimes the community has a lot of challenges, but for instance, just to give an example, for instance, the Macmillan cancer centers throughout the UK, they have that support, and they could be, for instance, a tool. And that's why we're here as well, is to share resources and mindfulness as well. Think charities or organizations like, for instance, Headspace, if you don't mind me mentioning them, is being helpful for some patients that I work with. So I think important as well is trying to find the right resources for our patients.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So the next question, my tiredness is overwhelming and I often struggle to keep my eyes open even though I'm not asleep. I don't know how to deal with this. I feel useless, alive but not living, and unable to contribute at home. How do I deal with this physically and mentally?
So two different topics, quite in the same answer, two very challenging ones. I think if we would put the most challenging question so far would be this one, because it's a lot to deconstruct the book. I mean, first of all, again, it's so difficult for us to try to give an answer not knowing exactly all the details. I know people do want answers, but for us, there is no general answer. And a lot of the times the answers are, in the details, in the small letters. I would definitely recommend to be open with her team, to talk about it openly, okay? Adjusting treatment, we mentioned that. Don't be afraid. It, more than often, it won't have at all an impact in the outcome of your disease. Much more important is for you to function. This it's a you cannot live your life if you're just purely focusing on the treatment. You need to live your life as a whole, and you need to live your life and be open to discuss these topics, which are quite difficult ones, I have to say. Not that you mentioned this question, and I wouldn't say there is an easy answer, but it's definitely achievable.
Great. So we've got time for one more question. I'm aware we've received a lot of questions that we haven't been able to cover just yet. If your question hasn't been answered, please do feel free to contact us on our myeloma info line or via our Ask the Nurse email service. So just for the last question, what would you advise in explaining fatigue to an employer?
Very good question. I think, as I said at the beginning, I'm myself. It's quite difficult to try to say to someone what is fatigue, because we don't have a scale. We don't have anything to measure it. I think the easiest thing to do is be quite open, okay? And no, unless you actually go through this, that's why I say the best thing I can do with my profession is to help other people and gathering experience, feedback, and that has taught me a lot, and that helped me a lot to contribute to the myeloma community. Um, don't be afraid to say exactly what you're feeling. And if it comes to that, I have to say, in apologies, is if I'm overstepping someone, if it comes to that, actually ask your team to put in wording. Ask your team what they would expect for you to function, considering the treatment that they're having, because a lot of the people sometimes are afraid losing their job, are afraid to talk with their employers, and it's nothing is better than asking someone for help to getting the right words. No, unless someone is experiencing this or has been with which we know, unfortunately, cancer in the UK, 1 in 2 people will experience it. So don't be afraid to say it to someone, or to talk about it and how fatigue is being impacted, because more than it's quite common to actually speak with someone that actually either the family or a close friend have experienced a sort of cancer, and they will identify why something like so vague. I don't want to put it but for the general population, is so vague, to try to make him understand how much impact he will have in his life and doing and performing his job.
Yeah, we've definitely spoken to patients who've had help from their medical teams in speaking to their employers and things. So certainly do speak to your medical team. So that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you so much, Nuno, for your presentation and for answering those.
Thank you so much, Em, and for everyone involved and in this presentation. I would just like to, at the end, just wrap up as well what we covered today. So we talk about this really hot topic, difficult one, and difficult to be open as well and talk about it, because a lot of the time, I think we normally, as humans, we're quite discouraged to talk about weaknesses, if we can put it this way. So we talk about how can it affect you, what are the causes of fatigue, and how impact it has in your energy bar, in your battery, and strategies and ways to actually manage them as best as possible. The 3 takeaway home messages that I wanted everyone to take is that you're not alone. This affects everyone throughout their disease throughout their journey. And it could be caused by, as we already mentioned, either the myeloma itself or throughout the treatments. And we are the ones to blame, because we do advocate for treatments. So do please come and tell us that we are the cause of it in some degree. And it has obviously a large impact in your daily life. If you obviously have things that you want to achieve throughout the day, you definitely need to find strategies to make it more efficient and to be realistically able to perform them. And obviously quite suspicious from my end, but I do find that this is a team effort. I cannot emphasize enough. This is all, we are all in the same boat, and we do want to help you. So do please tell your healthcare team as best as possible how we can manage this side effect.
So please remember that we are here to support you, and we offer so many services where you can speak to someone who understands. Myself and my colleagues on the Myeloma info line and the Ask the Nurse email services are available Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. We also have our range of info packs and info sheets. We have an info guide about fatigue, which it may be particularly of interest to people who've been listening tonight. As long as a range of other publications that you can download from our website or order in hard copy. All of our previous Digital Info Day sessions are up on our website as well, and on our YouTube channel, where you can watch them on demand. We also have a range of other support services which are on the screen now, and you can find more information about them on our website. Myeloma is a very individual cancer, but you don't have to go through it alone. There are lots of ways to connect with others and with people who know what you're going through. So we've come to the end of our event today. We'd like to thank Nuno for speaking to us this evening, and we'd also like to thank everyone who has joined us tonight. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Just a reminder that you can now re-watch this event on our Facebook page, and it will be available on our website soon. If we didn't answer your question tonight, or this event has prompted some new questions, please contact us. You can do this via our info line or Ask the Nurse email service. Our contact details are on the screen at the moment, but they can also be found on our website. Thanks to our supporters, Myeloma UK can provide free digital events just like this one for patients and their families. However you choose to support us, your generosity will help us change the lives of people living with myeloma and their families. There's a link that's being posted in the chat to direct you to ways that you can donate. Once again, I'd really like to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.